Hi there, Kia owners. Today in your 2022 Kia Telluride, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install etrailer's ETBC7 4-way to 7-way upgrade kit. Kit ETBC7 is designed to take your existing flat 4-trailer connector that you've got at the back of your vehicle and convert it into a fully functioning 7-way connector. You can see our 7-way connector here that comes in your kit. It's a nice 7-way connector because you get your 7-way as well as a 4-way. So if you've got probably have a 4-way trailer already, if you've got an existing 4-way and you've been using it, but maybe you upgraded to a bigger trailer, but you still got your smaller one that you want to use, so you've got the option to do so. So it's really nice that we've got both of those options there. There are dust boots to keep out dirt, debris, and moisture. The 7-way cap spring-loaded with a gasket on the inside as well to keep out dirt, debris, and moisture. And you're going to get a ton of extra wire in your kit to be able to wire up the remaining functions that a 7-way has. On the back of the 7-way that it comes with here, it does have a 4-flat connector that just plugs into your existing 4-flat connector, making getting all those lighting signals wired up really easily. So just plug and play for that portion of it. So it's kind of nice, and if that's all you're looking for is lighting signals in a 7-way, it's as simple as mounting it here in the back and then plugging that connector in, and then you've got that. Now the remaining 7-way functions though, you will have to route those wires yourself and make your own connections. You'll get plenty of length to do that, as well as the necessary connectors. Although I do recommend that you upgrade a few of the BUTT connectors to heat shrink ones, the ones that are particularly outside the vehicle here, to ensure a long-lasting connection. If you want to follow along with us, we'll show you how to get this installed. It is going to be a little bit time consuming. If you're doing this at home, I would say probably give yourself maybe between 2 and 3 hours. It just depends on the particular individual who's working on it and the kind of your shop, kind of the room you've got available, if you got any way to lift it up, because there is going to be some routing underneath the vehicle and stuff. So just kind of keep all that in mind. We're going to be using Takancha's P3 brake controller at the end to test out the functions, but we've got a lot of different brake controllers here at eTrailer as well, so you can pick out your favorite one and match it with your ETBC7 kit, so that way if you have a fully functioning 7-way and an ability to operate the brakes on any of those larger trailers. We'll begin our installation by mounting up the connector that comes in our kit. However, on the back of our vehicle here, we really don't got a good location to mount it. Because the bracket that it comes with, you would just run some self-tapping screws in, and this is all plastic. It's kind of flimsy, so I really wouldn't recommend doing that. I would recommend instead also purchasing a no-drill bracket. You can get that here at eTrailer. I did put a 90-degree bend in it there, and I just held it up on there where it was going to go, and I just draw a line across it to see where to bend it. And this will give me a nice location here with these holes to mount our connector up. So we're going to go ahead and get this no-drill bracket mounted up. This will just slide through the opening in the no-drill bracket, and then this will slide around the hitch. We're not going to put it this far off to the side, but sometimes it's just easier to work on the side, and then once we get it kind of started, we'll just slide it down the hitch until we reach the location we want it to be in. So you want to open up the bolt there to allow you to slide the other end of our clamp in there, and then you can close the bolt. Need to work our bracket around the hitch there, and now we'll slide it down to the position that we want it to be in, and then we'll snug it down with an 8mm socket. And before I get it all the way tight, while we still got a little bit of movement in it, we'll kind of get it into that position where we really want it to be in. About right there, looks pretty good. And then we'll finish snugging it down. And you can kind of tweak it and bend it just a little bit as necessary to get it exactly where you want it. And that looks really good where we want it right there. So now we'll mount up the 7-way bracket. This does come included with the ETBC7 kit. We're going to use the further spaced apart slotted holes, drop down the hardware that came included with the no-drill bracket, down through the holes. We'll then slide our 7-way bracket up onto those, and then take the nuts that came with the no-drill bracket and attach our 7-way bracket to it. We'll now take a 3/8 socket, and we're just going to put a little pressure on the top of the bolt head and then tighten it down. And in most cases, you're able to just hold that bolt in place and it'll snug down. Now we'll take our 7-way connector that comes in our kit. We're gonna slide our wires through the opening there. We'll then line our 7-way up with the holes in the bracket. Slide our bolt through, and I actually like to slide 2 through, do opposite corners. There we go. And then I can keep fingers on those, pressing those in. And on the opposite side, we're gonna follow that up with a flat washer, lock washer, and nut. All this comes included with your ETBC7 kit. And then we'll do the same thing on the other one here. And then we'll tighten up our hardware with a 3/8 wrench and a Phillips bit. So now we'll start making our connections here with the wires off the back. The 4-pole connector here should plug into your existing 4-pole wiring. If you don't have existing 4-pole wiring, you can get that here at eTrailer. We've got custom fit harnesses that will plug in, making your installation much easier. Now that we've got those plugged in, we've got 4 more wires here. Our white wire is our ground wire. Our black wire is our power wire. Our blue wire is our brake output wire from the brake controller. And then the yellow wire here is going to be your backup circuit for your reverse lights, for that lockout if you need to hook that up. This one here we don't typically install. You will have to tap into the lights on your vehicle for your reverse lights to do so. And since it's a direct connection onto your lights, if there is any fault on those circuits on your trailer that use those backup lights, it could affect the lights on your vehicle. So unless somebody specifically requests it, or if you know you're going to need it, you can install it. But if you don't, then sometimes you're best off just not to install it so you don't have any accidental issues on your vehicle. So we're just going to poke that one up in there. And then we're going to grab the duplex wire that comes in our kit and get that attached to these 2. So this is our duplex wire. You're going to have a bunch of it. It's kind of all mostly on the ground there. We need to take one end of it and we need to get our wires out of there so we can access and utilize those. So we're going to take our razor knife here and we're just going to slice right down the center. I'm not going very deep inside the duplex. I'm just mainly trying to score it to get through that first layer there, because we don't want to go through the second because we have the potential of cutting into the wires below it. So that's really all we need. We just need enough to be able to access those. We're just going to snip off the excess here just to get it out of our way so it's not bothering us. Then we'll take our strippers and we're going to strip back each end of the wires here on our duplex wire. So now that we've got these stripped, we're going to connect them to the wires here on our 7-pole. It'll go black to black and white to blue. You can use the butt connectors that come pre-installed on there. However, I highly recommend you get rid of those because they're not sealed, so moisture is going to get in there and you're likely going to be here repairing this potentially even before a year comes. So to make your life easier, take care of this now and just cut those off of there. We get rid of those. Those butt connectors, there's nothing wrong with them if you're using them inside the vehicle, in your trunk, you know, areas where it's not going to be exposed to moisture, they're fine. But here outside the vehicle, especially underneath where your tires and throwing moisture up all over everything, you're going to have a bad time. We'll then strip those back and we're going to upgrade it to heat shrink butt connectors. That's what these look like here. You can get these here at eTrailer, so you can go ahead and add those to your cart. We are going to be using a couple more of these later on towards the front of the vehicle, where we'll have some connections we'll need to make near our battery. We'll then just crimp these on. And again, we're going to match color for color. So we'll grab our duplex and our black wire, poke that in there, and then crimp it down. Well, then just repeat that for our white and blue wires to get those connected together, and then we'll grab our heat gun to shrink those down. Next, we're going to attach our ground wire, and we're just going to run that right into this little flange here at the bottom. We'll take our self-tapping screw, put it through the ring terminal, and run it in. It's a bit awkward to hold it all together though, so you can take the self-tapper and get it started first, and then we'll pull it back out and put the ring terminal on. There we go, we got it to start. After we get it to start, you can also use like an 1/8 inch drill bit to help kind of mark the hole there and help you get it started. And we'll take our self-tapper and just run it into place. Make sure your ring terminal's tight. We got a little bit of movement there. It's going to go a little more snug. And there we go, nice and snug. So now I'm going to take the rest of this duplex wire that we've got here. There's a ton of it. This needs to run up towards our engine compartment so we can connect it to our battery. I'm going to go ahead and route it now, and then I'll show you the path that I took to get it there. When routing your wiring, you want to make sure you avoid anything moving, like your suspension or steering components, and anything excessively hot, like your exhaust. So we went ahead and routed our wire. We zip tied it to our hitch here, and then we go down the side of our spare tire. We zip tie it to the suspension here. We go up over the suspension so we avoid any of that. When we come out the other side here, we come out next to our brake lines there. So we kind of just poke it into one of the open slots for the brake line bracket there. Continue on. We zip tie it to this bracket because there's no open slots. And then we stay above this paneling going all the way forward. To do that, there's a couple of bolts here. Three bolts. So you use a 10mm socket, and this one here is actually easy enough to just take off by hand. Then you can put your wire up above this panel and then just put those bolts back on after you've got it routed all the way up. And it'll come out right here, right where we've got fuel lines and brake lines going up. We're going to follow those fuel lines and brake lines because we know they're already routed in a location where they're not going to experience any damage. To get them up there, I'm going to use a fish wire here, which is just a piece of airline tubing, and then I taped my wire to it. Something like this works pretty well because the wire's pretty flexible. If you try to push it up there, it's going to want to just bunch up and you'll be a little frustrated. At home, you probably don't have airline tubing, but something you probably do have that will work very well is a metal coat hanger. You can unwind that and kind of flex it in the way you need to get it down here, tape it to your wire, and then pull it back up. So now that we're at this point here, we're going to go ahead and head back up top, and we're going to pull our wire up to get it up into the engine compartment. So here's the other end of our fish line tube. We're up here. We're just pulling this up. Make sure we get all of our wire pulled up here. And we kind of just fed it right down between the air box and the CPU that's right here. So I can't pull it any further. At this point, you want to just poke your head down below and make sure that you do have all the excess pulled up, because it's not uncommon for a loop to catch around a stud or something like that, and we don't want to leave wires hanging down below that could drag the road. So I'm just going to double check that, and if we're good, we'll move on. If not, then I'll unhook that and make sure I get all of it pulled up. So we got our wire pulled up here. We want to make sure it can't drop back down, so we're going to throw a zip tie on it. Just zip tying it to the factory harness here. And from there, we're going to kind of set our wire aside for a minute because we need to have some circuit breakers mounted up so we can have proper circuit protection when routing our wires. We're going to mount these right over here. There's kind of a little shelf here that should be a pretty good spot. If you feel below, there's quite a bit of an opening there, so it shouldn't affect our coil springs or anything like that. So we're going to be using the 30 and the 40 amp fuse in our kit. I'm going to have the 40 slightly closer to the battery. So that'll be our 40, that's our 30. There's little tangs on each side. We're going to use self-tapping screws just like we did for our ground wire in the back to run it right down into there. So we're just setting it into place and running it in. And then we'll just run on the other side. Now at this point here, we need to separate these two wires out because they're going to be going to different locations. The white one's going to go directly to the brake controller, and the black one's going to be our power circuits to power up both our brake controller and also for our charge line on our 7-way there at the back. So we're going to use our razor knife again, just like we did at the back. We're just going to gently run this down until we cut off all of the rest of the sheathing. So now we'll go ahead and hook up the black wire. This one's going to the back to charge for the charge line for the 7-way. So we want to hook this to the silver post on our 40 amp breaker. So that's this one here. So now that we know where we're going to hook it, get an idea of the length we'll need. That looks pretty good right there. We'll trim off the excess black wire that we have here. We can then strip back our black wire, take one of these small yellow ring terminals that come in your kit, slide that in place. We'll then crimp right on there. Take the nut off the silver stud. Slide the ring terminal on it. And then we're just going to reinstall the nut. Now we're going to take the rest of that black wire that we just cut off. We're going to need that to power up our brake controller. We don't need to fully tighten this down just yet. We can come back to those because we're going to wait to hook these to our battery until the end, so that way we're not working with any live wires. So we'll take this other end of our black wire, all the excess that we had cut off here. We're going to strip this back. Take another small ring terminal, attach this to the black wire, crimp this one into place, and this is going to go to the silver stud on the 30 amp breaker, because this is what's going to power up our brake controller. Both of these bronze colored studs are just going to go directly to the battery positive to power everything up here, but again, we're going to wait till later for those. So we're just going to take that off of there, take our ring terminal, and slide it over the stud. We can go ahead and tighten that down. And I think I changed my mind. I think we're going to route it like this around the outside. So now we're going to take both the black and the white wire, and this is the black wire off of the 30 amp breaker. Both of these need to get routed inside to connect to our brake controller. Where we routed our wires up here, there's actually a grommet on the firewall just down in there, and we're going to be running these through that grommet. It's easier to see the grommet on the inside, so what I'll probably do is take a screwdriver from the inside, poke through the grommet, see where it comes through here on this side, and then I can poke my wires through and then just pull them through from there. I'm telling you this because you're probably not going to see anything while I'm working, just because of the limited space. My arm's going to take up the entire cavity there. So we poke that screwdriver through, and then we use that same fish wire. I did cut a little bit of a taper at the end to make it poke through the grommet a little easier. And after poking that through, we just pulled it up here. We're going to tape our wires through it and then go inside the vehicle, pull on that fish wire to get these routed inside. Similar techniques, we're just using these over and over to achieve what we need to achieve here. Pull our fish wire. Sometimes if you're really tugging here on the inside and it doesn't want to go, you can go back outside and give it a little push from the other side. Ours came right through though, so we don't need to, but that's just something to keep in mind in case you're really struggling. You can push it from the other side. And if you can pull one side while you've got an assistant pushing on the other side, that can really help some of those stubborn grommets that are just kind of fighting the larger wires that you're trying to push through that you just poked with the screwdriver. But that'll help you get it to spread out and get it to slide through. Once we pull these through, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to double check ourselves on the outside to make sure that they didn't get hung up on anything and that we got them all the way pulled through. And if we did, then we'll continue wiring up in here. So now that we've got these routed in, we can trim off the excess. This is a pretty good amount to have here because we're going to be hooking our brake controller wires to this. So this is plenty. So now we know we've got our brake output and our power for our brake controller. The only other two wires you're going to need for your brake controller is a ground wire, which we'll be using some of the excess white wire that we've routed in here to connect to that, and then we can run that onto, there's many places we can ground it here in the vehicle, so we'll find ourselves a ground location here to connect that to. So we have two wires remaining we need to install in here, and these are way easier. One you'll need is a ground wire, and we use some of the excess white wire that we had to attach that. I put some black electrical tape on it just to mark that this one's ground, and we just routed this up, attached one of the larger ring terminals that comes in our kit, used a 13mm socket to remove one of the nuts off the stud for the vacuum brake booster right there, right behind your brake pedal. Slid the ring terminal on it and then just tightened it right back down. That'll give us our ground. You'll also see that there's a small red wire here. This actually doesn't come in your kit when you purchase a brake controller. The harness that it comes with is going to have a blue, black, white, and red wire on it. The red wire will attach to your stoplight switch. Our customer currently doesn't have a brake controller, so I used some red wire and attached it to the stoplight switch to extend it down, so that way when he does get a brake controller, he can easily identify the appropriate wire to attach it to. Typically you would just hook your harness from your brake controller directly to this, but I also wanted to show you how to make that connection, where to make it to. So if you follow this red wire up to your stoplight switch, there are 5 circuits coming out of the stoplight switch. We want pin number 5, which is going to be a middle pin. There's 2 rows of 3, so it's one of the middle ones, and it's green in color with a brown stripe. You'll get a quick connect that comes in your kit with your ETBC7. That's what we use to attach this red wire, and that's what you would use to attach your brake controller wire to it. So you just slide the quick connect over the green wire with the brown stripe, slide your red wire in there, and then just use some pliers to squeeze it down to make those two have a good connection. So now we've got all 4 wires we need here at our brake controller, so we're really at this point kind of ready to attach a brake controller, but we do need power. You might notice that at the ends of the black and the red wire I put on some electrical tape, because the black wire, we haven't hooked it to our circuit breakers from there to the battery yet, but once we do, that'll be live, so we want to make sure that it's not going to accidentally short. And the red wire that we attach to the stoplight switch is going to be powered up every time you press the brake pedal. It's going to send out that brake signal. So it's just there temporarily to prevent any shorts. And again, our customer doesn't have a brake controller, so that's why we taped those off to make sure. We'll now head outside and we'll finish connecting our black wire to the battery so we can then have everything we need to power a brake controller. We are also going to show you how to use a brake controller, so we're going to temporarily install one just to show final operation and testing. We'll now take the black wire that comes in our kit. We're going to use this to go from our circuit breakers over to our battery positive. We got enough left. If we fold it in half and cut it, we should have plenty to get over there. I am offsetting them slightly just because one is slightly further away than the other. We'll make our cut there. After we trim this, so we've got 2 pieces, we'll strip back each end here. We're going to place small ring terminals onto one end of each wire, and then we're going to place large ring terminals onto the other end of each wire. So when you're done, you should have 2 wires with 1 small and 1 large ring terminal on each. We'll now remove those nuts off the bronze studs, place our small ring terminals over, and then reinstall the nuts. I'm putting the slightly shorter one that I cut on this post here since it's slightly closer to the battery. Now this is a good point to tighten down your posts because they're not live. We've got all of our connections here. We all know we want them to run towards this direction to route towards the battery. For these, you'll want to use a 3/8 inch socket. Once we get these snugged down, we're going to route both these black wires over to the battery positive post. So we just routed it around the fuse box here towards the battery. Here's our positive. Press the release tab there to lift up on the cover. We're going to remove the nut there with a 10mm socket. We'll take each of our ring terminals and slide them into place on top of our stud here. And then we're simply just going to reinstall the nut. And we are going to make a small modification to our cover here. You see it won't close because it's hitting on those wires. We don't want to pinch those wires. So we're just going to trim out a small section of this here. This paneling does kind of usually like to almost break a little bit, but it usually is fairly controllable in the way that it breaks. So there we go. Put our slits in it. And then we're going to grab it in the middle here and just do like a little bend. Just like that. And usually it'll break off, but it'll be okay if it does become a little door flap like this. That would be fine as well.
Let's see how it closes. Oh, it closes great. And the little flap there is fine. That'll actually help prevent water from getting in there a little bit better if you are able to keep the flap. But in most cases, when you bend this type of plastic, it does usually snap off of there. But this is fine.
So here we've got an old P3 we're going to plug in just to show that the ETBC7 is working properly, that we've got everything installed. Again, our customer didn't buy one, so we're not going to be mounting this or anything. We're just going to show that it powers up and that it can put an output out. Here's our Takancha connector here. You can see it's got 4 wires on it, black, blue, white, and red. We're going to make all of our connections right here to the 4 wires that we attached. We'll go ahead and start with red. That's our brake signal from the vehicle. We're getting this from our stoplight switch. We're just going to strip that back. And we'll crimp the red wire off of our Takancha harness right onto there. Next, we'll hook up the black wire next to it. That's going to hook to the black wire that we ran. Next, we'll hook up the brake output wire. That's the solid white wire that we had routed from the back of the vehicle all the way in here. That's going to connect to our blue wire. And this is pretty standard too for wire colors. If you're installing a Kurt harness, I believe those harnesses also have the same colors, blue, black, red, and white. That's fairly standard for your colors for brake controllers. And lastly, we got the white wire here. That's our ground wire. We know that's the white wire that we got here that we put the black electrical tape on. So we'll strip this back, make our final connection, and we can plug it into our brake controller, see that she powers up. And then you will need to plug in either your trailer or a test box or something like that to get a trailer load to verify if you have any output at the back. And we've got a tester that we'll be plugging in to do so. All right, we've made all of our connections. We're going to attempt to kind of set this up in a way to where we can access it here, and it's not going to go too nuts because it's not actually mounted. We'll plug in our connector here at the back. So after we plugged it in, we can see it's powered up here. It tells us to press a button. We'll press a button and it shows that we don't have a trailer connected. So I'm going to grab that test box now and plug it in. So now that we're connected, you can see here that it's detected we've got a trailer connected, and it's going to allow it to put out an output. So first off, let's hit the brake. Oh, look at that. We got our brake signal. It's putting out an output. So we know that we're getting our brake signal. Perfect. At that point, really, we know that everything's working because the system wouldn't power up if we didn't have power and ground. That takes care of our black and white wires. All okay. We know that the white wire, the brake output that we'd run from the back of the vehicle here, that connects to the blue wire on our brake controller, we know that's good because it was showing it wasn't connected to a trailer. And when we plugged it in, it got that signal to show that, hey, it now is connected to a trailer. So we know that wire is working properly. And since we hit the brake pedal and we get an output, we know that the red wire that we attached is also working properly. So this vehicle's set up. It's ready to use a brake controller. Pick your favorite one here at eTrailer and you can go ahead and wire it in just like this. So now that we've got everything fully installed, the only thing left is to verify that the rest of our 7-pole that we put on there is working properly. We just want to make sure we've got a fully functioning 7-way there. So we plugged in our tester. If you look at the top right corner of the tester, you'll see the voltage meter showing that we have voltage. That's our charge line circuits working properly. We already verified our brake controller is working, so we know the brake output's working, but we need to get the rest of our lighting signals and make sure those are working too. So make sure you got your left turn signal, right turn signal, tail lamps, and brake lamps. With all of our functions working properly, we're ready to button everything up, go over anything that you've got, and use some zip ties to clean up any wiring that might be loose, and you're ready to hit the road. And that completes our installation of eTrailer's ETBC7 4-way to 7-way upgrade kit on our 2022 Kia Telluride.